Hello everyone. We're going to make eyes today. I'm going to be sharing with you a technique that I discovered for myself that I was really pleased with it. You're going to need wooden beads, and I found these at my local craft store, Joann's Fabrics. They had 3 different sizes. One was 10 millimeters, one was 8 millimeters, and the smallest one was 3 millimeters, and I purchased all 3 of them. The smaller ones, I'm not planning on really using them anymore, but I thought I would just go ahead and do an eye for this tutorial just to see what it's going to look like with a smaller eye for many of you that do smaller dolls. Okay, what we're going to want to do is we're going to have to prepare our wooden bead. And the beads that I purchased were really nice and smooth, but you could have a little rough spot, and if you do, just, kind of like lightly sand it. Pay attention to that part. If you see a little flaw in it, always buff it up. Okay, now we're going to fill the hole. I fill the holes with my 2-part epoxy. Now some of you might not have this, and you think, well, I could use polymer clay to fill it. I'm just going to share with you of what I saw with that. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be anything that you're not going to like or it's not going to work for you. Polymer clay, when it's cooked, it has a different finish to it. And I noticed that when I put the acrylic paints on it, it went on it and gave me a little different look. So I thought, when I was experimenting, let me try the epoxy to see if that paint goes on it different and I get a different look to it. And I did, for me anyways. So that's why I went with that. But the polymer clay will work in the hole and cook it, but that's just it. You have to cook that polymer clay before you even do anything, okay? Now then, after we fill it, we're going to, what I do is I'll take, and I'm getting one here. Now this is already sprayed and everything, but we're going to jump around with this. When I fill the hole with the epoxy, I just put my finger on top of it, and while the epoxy is wet, I just stick a little wooden, I put my finger on top of that, and then I take my little wooden skewer, and then I will just lightly stick it in there, and it will hold it so that when I'm getting ready to prepare my eyes for the paint and everything, it's so much easier. Okay, so we have that hole filled. Now we're ready to prime it, and then we're going to put paint. Now then, I want to share this with you because I was really leery with this, but I do want you to really be aware of this. I have not had a problem with this, and I know I've gone through 3 packages of these wooden beads when I was experimenting. And let me jump over here, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to be using. And I am going to be using Rust-Oleum primer and Rust-Oleum satin spray paint. Okay, on the back of the can, it says that it is for wood and that the wood must be primed. That is why that I bought the primer, because I didn't prime them and I just sprayed it, and what happened was it just lightly kept cracking, and I kept putting more coats and more coats, and it just eventually it was just chipping off. Can you use acrylic paints to prime? You can, but I'm going to share with you that when I did the spray paints, it was just so much easier to go outside and to spray it than it was to individually paint each eye. But you do it however that you want to do it. But here's the part that I want to really express, is that I was leery with, there was two things I was leery with this. One was the fumes, because I don't like to be around any kind of chemicals. But I wear a mask, and I also wear gloves, and I go way out in the open and I spray it. And I didn't have any problem with it. So I was very, very pleased with that. The only thing that you do want to do is after you spray it, when it dries, make sure that you have it in an area to where the dust won't get on it. But if it does, you can lightly buff it out. Okay, on the back of the can, it says here with the heat. Let's see, where's it at? Okay. Do not apply to surfaces that when heated exceed 200 degrees. Okay. I was leery on that because I cook my dolls at 275 degrees. But I don't cook, I stage bake it. So in other words, I don't have my whole doll in there and I'm cooking it over an hour or that. When I was experimenting with this, what I did, I saw that it never did anything to it. I had it at 275 degrees. I cooked it straight for 1 hour and it still did not do anything. I cooked it for another 45 minutes at 275 degrees. It still didn't do anything. Now, of course, I don't cook my polymer clay that way, but I wanted to see if that heat was really going to affect it. And I called the company and I wanted to find out a little bit more information. Now, how true this is, I don't know, but I'm going to share it with you. They said that they have to put a temperature on the back of the can. But when I explained to them what I was doing, they said that it should not have any effect with it. But they have a guideline that they have to put on the can so that people don't go and stick it in the oven, let's say at, 400 degrees or whatever. It's kind of like a guideline. But the lady that I spoke with, she said that 275 degrees, I should be perfectly fine with that. But she did say to experiment with it first, but she was pretty sure that it would take more heat. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, after I get them primed, which I will have them on my wooden skewer. My 2-part epoxy is all dried. I go outside and I will spray it with my primer. And it's kind of like a real light gray. Just lightly spray it. You don't have to give it a lot of coats. Lightly spray it. It dries real quick. Now, when I do that, sometimes I'll look at it, and if I see that I have a little mark or something, just take a fingernail file is what I use, and don't use a real rough one, and just kind of buff it out. Okay, then now I'm ready to do my satin spray. Now, it's going to depend on how you spray, because I might spray differently than you and you spray differently than me. But I found that when I spray, that if you hold your can pretty far and you lightly spray it, you got to make sure that it's really dry in between coats. And if you lightly spray it, it dries a lot quicker. And I found that that takes a lot more sprays, but I didn't have to wait so long for it to dry. Now then, the more coats of the satin white that you spray, the more it really becomes like a glass look. It's just beautiful. Okay, then what I do is after I've sprayed it, I will, when it's completely dry, I will take it off the wooden skewer and I will go around, and sometimes I just buff it because buffing it will even make it even shine more. Now, when I do that, we are ready to drill. Now, in this part coming up, it's very important on how I drill it, that it's going to capture this look that I want. Now, the other thing that I wanted to say to you too is that back to the spraying, if you spray and you get a drip, let it dry and go back in there and kind of like sand it out and then just start over. Don't go in there and try to wipe it. I did that and I made myself a mess. Wanted to share that with you. Okay, let's get started with the drill. You're going to need some kind of a drill, but you're also going to need a attachment. And the ones that I found, I don't even know what they're called because it came in a kit. And I found it at my hardware store, and I went on the internet just to kind of like search around to make sure that, you know, some of you that can't find it, you can find them. You want a ball end, and they have different sizes. I even have a bigger one, but I'm going to use the small one because I'm going to show you a way to drill this eye out in case you don't have a bigger ball. Okay, let's get drilling. Now, when we drill, I'm going to go straight down into the epoxy. This is an important part. I don't want to go any more than half of that ball. If anything, maybe a little bit less, but that's your guideline, half of that ball. And it's going to also depend on, you know, if you're doing a bigger ball, you're going to have to figure out your halfway mark. Okay, now, lightly put pressure down in it, and I wanted to show you, see, I can do this and it doesn't hurt, but please, if you use other attachments and they have a point, you could get hurt. Okay. I want to go straight down first, and I'm going to lightly push down because I want the drill to do the work. Now, as I'm getting that started, I push down a little bit. You hear my drill slowing down. If you put a lot of pressure, your bead will flip out of your hand. And I found that if you just go slow, lightly give it pressure, that doesn't happen. Okay, now I still want to go deeper. And let me see if I can bring it up to where we can see it sideways. Okay, I'm going to go with that depth, and I'll go back one more time to see if we can see it. See, I'm a little bit less than half, okay? Because you don't want it too deep, but you don't want it too shallow. Okay, now this is the part that I want to share with you in case that you don't have a ball that is as big as your iris. Instead of pushing down, I'm going to take the bit and I'm just going to go straight, but I'm going to wipe it across the sides. Just going in a circular motion. Go slow, because what I'm doing is I'm only trying to catch it around the sides so that I can open that up. And I'm trying not to make those sides in a deep cavity. Whoops. There. Now I'm getting it. We're kind of like opening it up, but not trying to go deep. See how I'm just going around and around? So you get it the size that you want. Now sometimes your drill, the bit, might slip off and might nick your eye. Don't worry about it. You might have to sand it out and then touch it up. But there's a little part that you need to know with that, is that if you need to go and touch it up and you have the Rust-Oleum paint inside that hole, I go back with my drill and I kind of like drill that paint out, because for some reason I don't like the way that the paint goes on the Rust-Oleum, or the acrylic paints or the watercolor paints. Okay, now I'm going to take my file and I want to smooth the top of that edge. Okay, it's looking good. Can you see that? Okay, now here to me was a huge part that was so important to me, and this was the part that I had all the stages of what it was that I was trying to capture, but this was the last stage, and it took me the longest to figure this part out, and it is important. I'm going to put on a much smaller ball bit. Now you don't want one that's real small, like a point, that it would be almost like a point. Now I'm going to try to explain this so that we can all understand this. What I want to do with this bit is I'm going to drill out underneath the lip of that curvature of the eye that is coming up around where it's cut out. I only want to hollow that out around the lip. And the reason for that is when I put my UV gel on, what it does is that it gives it the effect, and the eye, this part here, comes up around, and it comes to where it looks like the white part of the eye right in here is overlapping the UV gel, instead of the UV gel being on top of the eye and it overlaps the white. We're doing it in reverse. And as you're drilling, you're actually feeling the unevenness as you're going around, and you actually go in with your drill and just, I'm kind of like going over it. I'm not putting much pressure at all on this. Now sometimes by me doing this, which I can see I am, I'm going to have to fill it in a little bit more with the some epoxy. But if I fill it in with the epoxy, I don't want to fill that cavity in that I'm making around that lip. That would be defeating what look I'm going for here. Whoops. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I'll bring it up to the camera to see if we can see. Do you see how, what I'm talking about with the cavity? That I'm going right up underneath that lip. That's what I just drilled out. I want the lip to stay, but I want it to be more hollow in here, because when that UV gel goes underneath it, that's what I'm saying. I'm capturing where this is coming up over the UV gel instead of the UV gel going the other way, to where if I dropped it down, if I didn't have that cavity in there, it would look like it is sitting on top of that. Now, some of you might say, well, what if you take the UV gel and kind of like blend it together? I don't know. For me, it wasn't the look that I was going for. And when I figured out to hollow that out, it's like I just got the look that I wanted. So it's going to be a matter of what you want, what you see, or whatever. But I just wanted to share this technique with all of you. And then you guys can just play with it and do whatever it is that you want with it. And there could be, you know, people that have figured that out. I don't know. Now I'm trying to buff that little nick that I had there, and it looks like I'm going to be okay. I won't have to touch that up. Okay, that's looking good. Okay, now when you drill that lip out, your bottom gets a little bit rough. And what you need to do, now this is if you didn't have to go in and fill that in like I'm going to have to. I'm just going to take my larger ball and I'm going to just lightly touch. Just to smooth that out. Now that is if I didn't have to fill it in, because since I have to fill this in, I wouldn't be doing this. But I just want to show you that if you don't, and I'm going to show you how much deeper I went. Remember when I said it's really good if it's about a little bit less than that ball. See how much, whoops, sorry. Okay, see how much deeper I went? That can happen. So that's gonna, you're just gonna have to kind of play with that. But like I said, you don't want it too deep, but you don't want it too shallow, because too shallow, it just, to me, you don't get that effect of the depth of the eye. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take my 2-part epoxy, and I'm going to just fill in the bottom of that bead, and I'm going to be raising it up a little bit, and then we're going to get onto the painting part of it. So I'll be back.